Hi, I'm Nicole Hoff, and I teach K-5 art at Vicenza Elementary School in Vicenza, Italy, and I'm the 2017 District Teacher of the Year for Europe South. So I'm really excited to be part of this new wave of professional development. I hope it becomes the new standard model for professional development in DoDEA, which is job-embedded, standard-based, subject-specific PD, most importantly, for teachers, by teachers, and even more specifically for art teachers by art teachers. So even if these aren't the most perfect lesson plans you've ever seen, we hope that they're more relevant than the alternative. So I want to share with you something I really love to do in my classroom, which is collaborative art murals. I don't do these all the time, but I usually do one or two of them every year, and I have done them with a bunch of different grade levels from kindergarten through high school. So I just want to share with you some pieces that I've done in the past and hope that something sparks some inspiration that you could use as a lesson plan in your own classroom using the new CCRSA standards. So first I want to show you some pictures of that work and talk a little bit about my philosophy behind those things, and then I'll give some practical pointers and just some logistic things for making this work in your classroom, or at least how I make it work in my classroom. And then we'll get to do an actual hands-on activity where we get to make some art. So let's get to it.
I've always loved doing big works of art in class and getting lots of kids involved in projects. I believe that the art room should be a place where there's lots of movement and interaction and skill building, and where kids can try out tools and techniques that they might not get to anywhere else, but also a chance to build interpersonal skills, because when we're doing just individual projects, the kids don't necessarily get to work with each other, and that's an important life skill. In this particular case, they were laying down and tracing each other's bodies out. This is a great start for a Keith Haring mural as well. But they just made organic shapes, and we talked about different kinds of shapes, and then they were able to mix some colors as well, and we did primary and secondary colors, and then they painted in a ton of them, but had to work together to do that, and here's how that went.
I'm taking a little video. Anybody want to tell me what you're doing?
What's up, bro? We're making abstract art. We're making abstract art.
What was your process? How'd you make it?
First, we laid people down on the paper. And then we made their shoulders, and we traced people. And we made different shapes with their bodies.
How's this working out to have all of you painting one painting at the same time?
It actually gets it done faster.
Good teamwork. How's it working with having not, like everyone has to share the brushes and the paints? Is that working out?
It's actually, it's working out.
Alright, how are you figuring out who gets what?
We just ask, what color you want to use.
So a big piece of my classroom culture is having kids figure out how to work together. So here's another example where I just had big pieces of paper and the kids were working on concentric circles and painting circles on top of each other. And some kids worked together really well. Some kids are obviously new to this concept and needed a little bit of coaching on how to do that.
Are you guys painting with teamwork?
Yeah. I want to help.
What's your plan? How do you do it?
He does yellows and we do, and I do orange.
Oh, very cool.
That's what we are trying to do. Okay, we let him do that.
Well, that's nice of you to let him join your team. I'll get you some more greens.
So you're always going to have the little guy that busts in with green paint, but what's great about that is that it gave us a chance to really talk about it and reflect, and all three of us, as I was refilling his paint cup, got a chance to talk about how they had a plan before he showed up and how he came over and maybe how he could have asked, but how well they reacted to that and how they all worked together. And so that teamwork piece is really, really important, and it lets me get to know my kids really well. So this is a giant Earth that we made for Earth Day last year. It was first, second, and third grade students that did it, and they did all the drawing out of the continents, and they had a little help with that, but for the most part, they really planned it out and mapped it out. And so I made connections back with the social studies and geography standards for each of those grade levels. We talked about landforms, we talked about the continents, they were asking questions about the equator, and really talked about things that were connecting back to what they were studying in their classes. And then they got really curious about things like, where's Germany? Or did we forget Madagascar? And I was born here, and where's the United States? And so I have this big map on the wall, and they would go go back and forth and draw things out and duke it out about how big something should be or how small something should be, which was pretty cool to watch them think through that whole process. So the other logistical piece for this is, how do you draw this giant circle? So I turned this into a challenge for my older kids. And you can ask the question, okay, how do you take this string and this marker and turn it into a perfect circle? And you'll get these wonky examples, which clearly is not actually a perfect circle. But if you use it and make your own compass, then of course you can make a perfect circle that way. So I show the kids how to do this if they can't figure it out on their own. It works best to have kids work with partners, and so if you have two kids working together, then one of them can just hold the string rather than needing tape. But this is how I demo it. And this is a great CCRSM connection, talking about circumference and diameter and radius, and having authentic integration of math skills into art because you're needing it for serving a real purpose. It also connects back with the standards for mathematical practice, the SMPs for elementary school. 1, make sense of mathematical problems and persevere in solving them. 5, use appropriate tools strategically. And so they really enjoyed learning how to do this. And then I also showed them how if you continuously wrap this and make the radius smaller as you go, you can make a perfect spiral. And they thought that was a pretty cool trick. So making those connections with the CCRSM and the CCRSA is really exciting when you can do that in authentic ways. I want to show you this other map example that was made by one of my colleagues, Nancy DeCaro. She teaches Sure Start here at Vicenza Elementary School, and she actually made this bottle cap mural with Sure Start students. And I think they just did a really amazing job. So the kids are actually doing all the painting, and then they used power drills to actually drill in the little caps throughout this whole cardboard mural, and with the help of an adult, of course, but they got to use those power tools, and they thought that was pretty awesome. And so in our new CCRSA, for 3rd grade, there's specifically a standard that has to deal with maps, VA.CR2.3.3a says individually or collaboratively construct representations, diagrams, or maps of places that are part of everyday life. So if you happen to teach elementary, that's now an explicit part of our 3rd grade standards. So here's yet another way how one of my colleagues tackled this collaborative art process, but I just think that these bottle cap murals are pretty cool, regardless of what you're making out of them. So this next project is a cityscape mural, and I did this back when I was working at Lodges and I was teaching K-12 all in one classroom. So the challenge of working on a big project like this is logistics, right? So if you have a giant project laying out across your tables and you're switching from high school kids to elementary kids, you can't really clean that up and switch it in between. So I had to find something that would work for standards across all of my grade levels. So I had kids, if you look up close, you can see there are some self-portraits in there where they actually used their head and then made a collage self-portrait body. So some of my classes were working on portraiture, and that's how they contributed to this mural. Then I had little kids that were working on collage in general, and they ended up doing some other collage, but we added collage to this. And then at my middle school level, they were working on printmaking. So I had them make styrofoam blocks that they could use to carve windows and buildings into, and they made skyscrapers with styrofoam blocks and did the printmaking process with these styrofoam blocks. And then my little kids got to use the styrofoam blocks that my middle schoolers made and still learn about the printmaking process, but didn't have to be quite so precise in trying to actually make the stamps. But then we had all these kids doing different media techniques and processes and all collaborating in on that same mural, so I could leave it out in my classroom. And then the kindergarten classes were actually working on a similar concept. They were working on the concept of community. So my colleague Laura Lee Serrani, she had her class build this 3D model cityscape, and so we worked together to be building that concept both in 2D and in 3D. So I'm all about process over product, but it's really nice when your product turns out to be really beautiful as well. So here we were looking at Georgia O'Keeffe and incorporating some famous artwork. But this was really an exercise for my kindergarten and 1st graders to do some finger painting and mix some colors. So we made orange, and then they were practicing cutting circles and practicing their scissor skills cutting fringe. So I was really working on a bunch of different skills that don't necessarily make beautiful artwork under other circumstances. You end up with just a whole bunch of finger paint paper. But in this case, what we did was we cut up all of our finger paint paper and turned them into poppies, and then lined our entire main hallway in the school with poppies. And the kids were really, really excited to see all of them come together. So this next one was a whole unit on Chinese New Year, and we made this giant Chinese dragon. So my 4th and 5th graders made the whole head. It really was a completely student-led project. They had a lot of logistical challenges trying to figure out how to put the boxes together to make that. We learned how to use glitter in appropriate ways, which was always a challenge. And they were using box cutters to cut the cardboard apart, and this was really all a student-led project. We looked at a lot of inspiration videos, a lot of inspiration images, but they worked together to make all the pieces on this. And so they created a 3D sculpture for the dragon head, and here you can see the beard that they made for it. And then each student made a scale. So we made these out of those cheap, flimsy paper plates, and every single student in the school, kindergarten through 5th grade, made an individual piece of artwork that was going to be a dragon scale. So we used watercolor resist as the technique, and then they had a little formula of how to put a black border and a red border on it, and then they installed this gigantic dragon down the main stairway of our school. And what I really love about this kind of a project is that every single kid was part of it, and so every time they came up and down the hallway, you'd hear them say, "Oh, that's me, that's mine, I made that, I'm part of this." And I think there's a real sense of belonging, especially for our military kids that are constantly in transition, to be at this school and to say, you know, I'm part of this, I'm right there on the wall, I'm part of something bigger than myself. And that was really meaningful and exciting to them to see their artwork come together with something that was so impressive. So the kids decided that we really needed to have an actual dragon parade, that this couldn't just stay in one spot on the hallway. So in addition to the scales that we made, we also made these giant paper paintings, and then we did a Chinese New Year dragon parade. So the kids got to wear the dragon and be the dragon body and parade down the hallway. And so then I also had my little kids in kindergarten and 1st grade make musical shakers and make masks that they got to wear, so they got to be in the parade doing that. And the shakers were just a really fun experiment. They got to be a little scientists checking to see which kind of can or bottle made better noise, and whether they wanted to use beads or peas or dried beans or rice inside of them, and which kinds of things made which noises, and got to use colorful tape. So they had a lot of fun experimenting with that and making their homemade musical noise makers instruments. And then again, I'm all about process over product and connecting this with lots of different grade levels. So we had different grades meeting different standards through projects that were all connected back into this theme. So my older kids were working on symmetrical drawing. We made paper lanterns we had to use rulers to measure out the 1-inch marks. This was a fine motor activity for my little ones, where they were using pom-pom balls and transferring them, trying to use chopsticks, and it was pretty cute to see them when they actually could use them. They got really, really excited when they could pick up a pom-pom ball with chopsticks. We also did some Play-Doh creations, and I've been letting them I've been lowering my guard with Play-Doh. I used to be that you got one color, and now I'll let them use multiple colors of Play-Doh, and I've also started letting them use gemstones and plastic doodads to stick into their Play-Doh, and they think that this is the coolest thing, to get to use old Mardi Gras beads, or these were Chinese New Year coins that I ordered, and to decorate their Play-Doh creations. And they actually do a really good job of pulling them back apart and separating them out. This is a sand art project. We also made firecrackers out of toilet paper rolls, and the kids had to use different kinds of adhesive to do that. We learned about the legend of the willow plate, and the kids painted china plates using tints and hues of blue. My older kids did scratch art, so they created these Ming vases by coloring with oil pastel first, and then painting a thin layer of white paint over the top, and then scratching it like scratch art. And then we also made Chinese opera masks with paper mache, and they look a lot like authentic Chinese opera masks, which is pretty fun. and we did Asian ink painting using sumi brushes and India ink. So as you can see, we decided to really take this project and run with it. But what was great about it was that even though I teach so many different grade levels and so many different standards, I was able to give myself a theme and sort of keep everything tied back to this central idea for a real sense of continuity.